So here I have the reference photo that I'm going to use, and I have 2 sheets of paper that I'm deciding between, and I'm going to tell you my thought processes from why I'm choosing one or the other. So I just lay it on the blue, and I can see that it's picking up some of the deeper blues in there, and it's contrasting nicely with the yellows that are in the stone and in the straw. I put it on the black. Oh, that's really giving me the deep darks that I want back there, and the darks on the legs. But I want this to be a warm painting. There's so many neutrals in it that I want to make the most of the yellows that are coming through in the wood and the goats first and the straw. So I'm going to do it on its complementary blue rather than on the black. So having chosen that, if you are not confident in your drawing of animals or some other objects, complicated objects at the beginning of your art journey, don't get too worried about it. I think it's better to copy this and then get onto the painting and do some practicing of your drawing separately as well until you get really confident in your drawing. So if you just want to get in and lay in some pastel and do some of the painting process and not get too stressed by the drawing, what I do is just chop this off the way I want it. Make sure I've positioned it where I want it. Do I want it up, down, across? Then I'm going to go in, and you might be happy to freehand in some of it, but not others. So perhaps you're concerned about the goats. I'm taking a very light yellow because it's going to show up well on the blue. And I'm just running it all over the back of the goats. I might just do a couple of corners there so that I know where they come in, but I'll freehand everything else. Just tip some of the excess off. Then I position it where I'm going to want it on my paper, and I'm actually quite happy with it there. What I'm going to do now is just trace it in. So I'll just take a sharp pen and I'll start tracing it in. It's a good idea to actually tape it down so that you can lift it up and make sure it's working. So I'm just going to keep my finger firmly here and lift it up, and I can see that the yellow's coming through. It's not going to be permanently yellow on there because it's just a Conte pastel I've used, but it will give me the basic shapes. I'll know they're in the right place, because with the painting it's all about how you apply the pastel and the colours that you use. That's going to make it a good painting, or one you need to do some more work on. So here I'm just getting in those main shapes. It doesn't take long. Of course, you can also do this with the normal transfer paper that you can buy at the art shop, but sometimes you don't have it, or you might have a graphite one that's not going to show up so well on black paper. So just getting all these shapes in. Just do that quickly now that we've talked about it. Not forgetting this little nostril. This will not make you have a great painting. This will just help you not worry about the shapes and concentrate on putting on the paint. You can go away and practice how you draw goats until you're really comfortable with them, but it doesn't have to stop you starting a painting right now. I'm putting in some of those corner marks, but you're probably quite happy to freehand this part. Just going right around the goat here. You can even put in some of those major colour markings if you want to. You don't have to. It's up to you how much detail you put in at this stage, but it's just to get you started. Like I said, it's not going to replace your artistic expression by any means. That's just where it's going around under its chin, coming down there, little mouth, inside the ears. And then I'm just going to do a little check Another thing I can do to create interest in the background is a bit of that underpainting I talked about before. I have here some Digger's isopropyl alcohol. Any sort of rubbing alcohol will do. I've just put some into a little cup there. And then what I can do is just take a mix of quite darks in there. Just swish them around. And they can be any darks I like, just a good mix of them, some purples, some red or brown ones. Just lay them right in there. Put them back into that corner down there. And then I can just dip a brush into it and move that around. Now I'm creating a very deep dark background there. I can go back over that again if I don't like it with other colours, and I can use that to just start delineating the areas between the logs and the rocks and so on. Sorry, the logs and the beams. So here I am brushing it back into the and I can use it if I wanted to make some of the cracks going down the doorway here. Just run it down there. Or higgledy-piggledy, because it is kind of higgledy-piggledy. And I can use it to draw in some of the other main elements just by dipping it in the isopropyl alcohol. It dissolves all the pigment and lets me move it around. So I can just move it right around the goat there. I don't have to use it in all the spaces. I can just use it in some if I want to. I can even go into his little legs and paint some of those in. Go into the background spaces. As I come down here, I've got different colours, so it'll come out differently. So I can do that to get myself a bit of a different textured background just by moving it around like so. Let it dry, and then I can go back in with some other colours. So that's one way you can achieve an underpainting, by just using the soft pastel and the isopropyl alcohol. So that only takes moments to dry because it's alcohol, and so I can just leave it to dry while I work further into my goats back here. I'm just using some different purples that I pulled out, and it gets quite dark as you go back into this area, and it will be some blues in there as well. I'm just adding all that colour into the goat, quite dark down in this area of the goat. And that's just Mum behind Bub there. I'm just running some of these colours over the other areas on the goats too. Just to... You can see I've messed up his little face again, but that's okay. I just keep going back and forth in there with these. And that's what I meant about you're going to lose it as you work, because you do lose it. And then you have to go back in again and find it again. Here I'm putting in the little white highlights over there, and you can see I'm not using white, I'm using yellows. Some different yellows, some pinks as we come up around. There's a little eye there, and around there. I'm just laying in those pinks. and working some of those pinks back into his fur there. So I'm getting a pattern of lights and darks on there. It's very light there, so I am going to go back in with that real sort of white colour and work a little bit back up in that those edges there, just to help really sharpen it up a little bit. Like I said, I probably will have to get out my pastel pencils to tidy things up towards the end. The ear has got a nice warm bit inside it, so I'm just popping a little stroke of warmness in there, and then it goes into the darker, deeper purples. That's the inner ear, and his little horn over that side is much darker, but it's also darker on this side, and it's going to have some little ridges in it, and we're going to put those in later on with the pencil. I'm just pulling it down now in dashes of colour. And where my alcohol's gone over there, I can just go back and reclaim that. So if I want to go into the background again now, I can just start laying in my colours again over the top of that, and you can see I've got established a very dark background, which isn't black. It's nicely dark, but no black in it, just by moving it around. And I can just add in some more colours in there and just keep it fresh and interesting. Or I drop some alcohol there, you can see what it does. It just makes those marks, but that's easily fixed. If I just go back in again, and here I'm just adding in some warm lights on the doors, patches of lights in the lighter colours. But most of the door is sort of pale blues and some pale pinks, some pale blues, and they'll be neutralised blues. This is too light, but I'm just going to use it to run down there, and then I'll modify it with some of my other colours and it'll be fine. So I've put that blue in. Oh. That is too wide, and you start to see this after a while that you've done things a little bit wrong, but that's okay because I'm going in with some bits of other colour there too, just as it disappears behind into the interior. We have a few chances to put a little bit of extra colour in, and that's what I'm doing there on some of those logs. But we don't want it to go too far back being too colourful, because it does fairly soon disappear into the depths there. The logs need a bit more interest on them. They're not just all black in the interior either, so there's some bits of caulking or something. I'm not really sure what it is, but I don't really need to be sure because all I'm doing is putting in some blocks of colour. So I can not worry too much about why it's that colour, but more about am I expressing it, the colour in there. And then I want to put a little bit of light falling down here on these stones too, the steps. putting a little bit more than there really is for some contrast. That's his little rump back there. And so I'm doing a sort of a rounded shape there, and I'm going back into it with some greys and some touches of pinks. So the goat's forms are taking shape, and you can see the cracks in the mortar bits there. They will get some more colours into them as well, so that they're not just one-dimensional. I've got a nice contrast between the lights and the darks there. I'm just pulling these down. It's more pink on this leg, but I'll let it be a bit blue as well. And I am dragging some of the other colours from the markings into it. Make that slightly darker again around Bub. So I'm coming in with the purple and pulling that down. It's quite dark down here, but not as dark as the background. Just adding in some interesting touches of colour as well, because I don't want the goat to be boring. So I'm just adding in a few little complementaries. So here I've got some of the orange going in with the purples and blues, and some of the yellows going in with the purples and blues, which will help to neutralise them a bit, make them a little neutral colours whilst keeping it interesting. I've just got out all my, not all, but some of my pastel pencils so I can put some details in when I want to. Just make some crisper lines. I'm going to be doing some more work on the logs, and down here in the, just move that a little bit so you can see this area here, which is quite dark, so I'm just going to add in some darks. That's just the same sort of dark as the background there. Just adding in some darks here. Some more darks on the wooden boards there. Down some darks into these areas. There are some boards here that have a very light top to them, probably coming around about there. So light top, light side, just like this area here is very light. And I'm putting that in. With a touch of lightness along some of the board. So I'm making this a bit darker and putting in some of the darker lines in some of these boards, just to, and some of these are going to get some little marks in them too. There's some cracks in the wood and going up the logs. These ones have got some little cracks in them too. So there'll be a whole lot of these going on. Just suggestions of what I see in the reference there. Just putting some tree ring lines in there, in those big old stumps. So cracks and ring lines, and these ones have got some cracks in them as well. And then there's a whole lot of ones across here. But I also want to get in the sunlit edges there. And this board, so that's just going to have a bit of a plank horizontal there. I'm just putting them in the way they should go, drawing the planks horizontal like so. I want to mark the top end of the door there and have some of those colours coming down into it in a sort of yellow and peachy colour, just to add in a bit of colour. And there's some of those colours going into the interior. And I'm just adding a few of them on, and there's a few of those little warm colours in the goat's coat as well. I'm just using some of the pastel pencils now to make a little bit further delineation there on some of the shapes of the goats. And to help with a little bit of blending, and just a little bit, some little bits of warmth in amongst the cooler shadows as well. And his little horns have some ridges on them, so I'm just putting those ridges in. And in this side as well. And sometimes when you're doing this, you sort of need to go back in and restate some of your outlines a bit. So mama goat is quite dark behind there, baby goat is quite light against there. I've got to do a little bit of work on the eyes and the muzzle and so on. And just around here, I'm just putting in the little nostril shape. Probably actually down a little bit lower. And the little nostril there. I'm just using the pencil to blend a little bit there. And the same here, just blending a little bit with the pastel stick. And there's a little bit of darkness going up here just to help shape his eye. And it is just easier to do this with the pastel pencils because it's a bit more detailed. And here I'm just putting in some suggestions of the way his coat, the fur in his coat is going. And there's his little hoofs. I want those to go in a sort of bluey grey colour, so putting them in with this blue pencil, and then I'll go over them with brown to sort of a little hoof there, and going around and just making it quite dark in here so that the legs are really well delineated. That's just using a black, quite a dark black pencil over the top of the background I've already put in. It just helps to really darken it off and then get that nice gap in between the legs. Here I'm just kind of chipping in to the goat and the background with the same coloured pencil to try and blur the edges a bit back here between background and foreground, so that we start to lose the goat a bit in the shadows there. Leather strap around the goat's neck, and then it's got a whole lot of buckles and things going on here, so just getting that in. And it's going to have some blue in it too along the edge. Down here is the actual bell. And I'm just trying to put some little highlights on it by putting white over the... In fact, what I really need is a blue, and I might go and get myself a blue. Oh, I've got a blue and a grey here, so that might be what I use for the highlights. Round the corner is the rest of it, and it's kind of fading into the background there. So there's the bell. I also have a ring on the buckle, so that's coming around like that, part of the buckle. These are just little details, but they all help to make it readable. So that's the leather strap there, and under here it's quite a lot darker, the strap, so I'm just putting in the dark parts, and it becomes dark out there again. So quite dark in there, and then another buckle we need. So the other buckle is going around like that. Just to fill that buckle up a bit with the strap. And the strap comes out like that with a little bit of a highlight on it, so watch out for your highlights. Probably needs to be a lighter highlight, so I'm going to take the white and go over that blue. I've got a lot of more work to do here. What I'm going to do now is drag that one down. So it's a pole that's coming down like so, and it comes all the way down. It's darker on that side, so just taking a darker one, dragging it down. And it's kind of light filled this side, so I'm dragging down a light yellow one just to get the light and cooler sides. This one over here needs a bit of work around it and some little lines going through it, some bits of darker and lighter bits on the wood. Thing in the wood, and here we go here. Just doing that board again, making it a sharp edge across, sharp edge there, sharp edge. A little bit out from there. Underneath it, it's nice and shadowed through there. Quite dark shadow, so I'm just putting in now some different colours to create a nice deep shadow under there. There's some warms in the shadow as well. And there'll be that straw starting to kick in soon. I've got that coming up dark. So I've got logs looking like logs, goats looking like goats. I've got the contrast between the shadows and the highlights on the faces. I've got the deep dark contrast between the logs and the timbers around it and the brickwork at the bottom here. I'll just be reinstating some of those kind of lines that so the dark shadowy bits going in, just overlaying some dark colours to make that, and some various kind of different shades of browns and neutrals in the wood. There's some nice notes of sunlight on some of these, so right here I'm just putting a little bit of sunlight on the edge of that. And we have the sunlight on the edge of the goat there, on the edge of the wood. Again down here, that whole lot's a bit lighter. Down here, across the top, and down here. Just putting in some darker colours in there. This is where it's sitting into the structure above it, and there'll be some of this colour running through those yellows there. and the top of the boards like so. I don't feel that there's enough warmth here in the goat's fur here, so I'm just putting in a little bit of yellow on there just to make the contrast a little bit more decided. So that's just ramped up the sunny side of it a little bit there. I think that ear's all wrong on that goat. It needs to be fatter up here, so I'm putting in a little bit more. The time has come now to put in all this fur. I know I have still got more work to do up here, and I'm just going to go underneath there with my pencil and just shade a bit down, pulling that dark line down there, and just pulling a few little lines through the doorway. And this is quite dark, but it's leaving a more blended look because I'm just pulling it over the pastel underneath it, so it's not going really sharp and dark because there's a lot of lighter colours underneath it, so I can get away with using the really dark pencil. Now, I'm just pulling out lines at this stage and then occasionally giving it a bit of a rub back with the pencil, and I'm going to go in with some of the violet ones and do the same with it, just to smooth the wood out a bit, blending some of the colours I put in together. And the same happens up here on this little line, which is the gap, and I'll be blending a bit more here. So it's starting to look like boards now. It's quite blended down here too. And on this one I want to have it a bit paler, so I'm taking the violet colour. So you can see that pencils can work for blending really quite nicely. Just blending them. And I'll be going into that to make some straw in a moment. And that was the edge of it. Just want to blend it off slightly, the edge, so it's not quite so sharp. And in amongst here there's some different colours in the brickwork too, so I'm just using some of these. To give it a little bit of a different look there too. A little bit more mottled, and some of the beams here are going to get a bit of this work as well. Some of these are just imaginary lines because I'm not looking over there and trying to replicate everything I'm seeing. I'm just putting in some. This one has some little lines down the post as well, and they're going in just again. And I can use some different coloured pencils to get some different colours into it. Just doing that whole, because I'd like a little bit of warmth in it as well, and so I'm putting a little bit of warmth over here with these ones. So it's not just all greys. We want the contrast of the warmth against the cool, as well as the lights against the darks. And here I'm just scrumbling it over so that it picks up some little smatterings of the light colour against their shadows back there. So it's all about contrast, light against dark, sharp edges against the more blurry edges, and so I've got some quite sharp edges there. This is a knot in the wood, so just putting that in now. It gets lighter around the darker rim down there, and it's quite dark inside the knot there. So a knot in the wood there, and there are more knots in the wood down here that are lighter, and you can put them in or you can leave them out, whatever you decide to do. Just needs a little bit of So here I'm just trying to draw in a few more of the sort of cracks that we get in there as it's all melding together. And I'm going to use some of this black pencil to do a bit of that shading. Pulling it out from there and then just modelling it, adding in a bit of the lighter colours, warmer colours as well. Up here there's a kind of tops of the boards there, and that's where you get some of the splits coming down from the tops of the boards. And up here again, just pulling back a little bit from the edges, and a few little nail holes there too, so I'm putting a few of those in. Just a few more little lines across there for that board. So I've got quite believable wood there, created by lights against darks, scrumbling colours over each other, then some fine line work for the cracks in there. I've got to put in all that straw now, which will be a kind of finishing touch. Some of these could do with a little bit of sharpening up and so on. Making some of those areas slightly darker around. Where mum and baby kind of blend in together. Partly to make the horns and so on stand out, but just to get a nice contrast going on, a little bit more texture there. And up through here, I just want to... I've been a bit naughty and got my dirty little hands all over it as I've been by leaning my hands on it. I should have had a piece of clean paper there. I want to put a little bit of not just the same colour in there, so adding slight brown, warm browny colours in there with the blacks as well. So some horizontals to represent the logs going in there. And I've made the interior quite colourful, even though it's very dark. The little hoofs down here do need to be tidied up a little bit, so I'm going in with this kind of bit of colour on the legs. And it's kind of cool down there, so I've made it a bit cooler and quite dark in purpley colour in the dark patches. Onto those legs. Just adding a little bit of warmth there down its little legs. But not too warm. So I'm just going to lighten it off a bit take some of the warmth out by using a white, which is not as warm as those yellow colours. And maybe have a little bit of darkness running through there. Okay, what I have noticed is that the edge, that ear is not as well delineated as it could be, so I'm making it very light and white there, coming back into a more subdued grade there. And it's going to have a little touch of yellow going all the way across there. And then underneath it is a kind of warmy pinky colour. So put a bit of pink and some of the sienna in there. Still not quite right. But we'll just leave that for now, because I want to put in some of this fur down here. Fur I was going to call it, but it's the straw. And the straw is just all little tangly bits, like so. And some of them are best put in with the pencils. So a couple of different pencils, just putting it in the straw. Over here there's just some kind of masses of lights and darks that will work out the straw out of. And you'll just see little bits coming out of them that are catching in the sunlight. We want to keep them fairly fine though, because the straw does tend to be fine, and it's tending to be yellower up here. So we just put some darker colours in as well. And just pulling some of them out of the darkness down here. Most of that's lighter along there, and then we're pulling them out. What I'm also going to get at this stage, take away my pencils and get some contes going in there. So these make excellent little drawing sticks for finer marks. So they tend to catch on and blend whatever's underneath as well, so you just have to be careful that you're not blending too much whatever's underneath, and you are making some good marks that are really descriptive of the straw. I can also put in a few darker patches there where it's just the shadows within the straws there in themselves. So I'm just putting some of those in. And a few touches of really bright ones amongst it all. This one's a more bluey colour, so I'm going to put some blue, light blue ones in there as well. Over here it's very much brighter and sunlit. And there's some cooler ones over here, which I'm going to actually put in with some blues amongst the straw there as well, for the straw that's in the shade. So I'm pretty much going to call that done. Just a couple of final strokes of texture down there, across there, maybe up in that patch as well. And there we have it. Goats. It's an exercise in contrast between man-made objects, organic objects, the squiggly wiggly organic shapes of the straw, the very straight shapes of the planks and the brickwork there, then the light and the shadow forming the faces and the horns and some of the small details on the goats, and the texture on the wood created with the pastel pencils and just layers of pastels that can be blended with the pastel pencil but also make fine marks. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this demonstration of the goats within their little shed. See you next time. Bye for now.